All right, great. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you all. I'll just share to kick off that I am board member of Conscious Capitalism. It's a organization that I believe very much in. And when I first heard about Conscious Capitalism, what really drew me to the organization was their overarching higher purpose around elevating humanity through business. Because it just seems like there's this opportunity, right? Businesses play such a strong part of in society, and they have a tremendous opportunity to be able to step in and really make a difference in meaningful ways. And it's interesting now to see what's happening in society and culture, because I feel like the businesses that are more conscious and paying attention to their culture, their people, and their stakeholders are actually doing better right now than those that aren't. And so maybe this will be a trend that we will see going into the future, that there's more elevation around conscious capitalism and companies that really adhere to these principles. So today we're really coming together, myself and Jen and Sandy. We are co-CEOs at InspireCorps. And we are also co-authors of a new book that came out in November called Dare to Inspire. And we're here today to really just have a conversation about really leadership. We're focusing in mostly on the pillar of conscious leadership. So how is conscious leadership really playing an important part right now in society? So we're excited to kind of deep dive into that, but we are also excited to go in other directions if folks have questions. So we have a few questions that we planned to go through and answer, but we also welcome if you all along the way want to either pop off on audio or pop into the chat questions as well. So with that, looks like Glen is jumping in with the first question. How did the three of us come together around this idea of inspiration and leadership and organizations?
I was just catching the chat already. Also, is engagement or leading others' responsibility? Yes.
Great question.
Eleanor, great question out of the gate. We will get to that, but I'll throw in a little teaser right now that it is a leader's first job to inspire self. We think it's next to impossible to inspire the people around you if you don't start with yourself. So we'll talk more a little bit about that. Now, that being said, should a team take responsibility for inspiring the leader as well? Of course, but from a building blocks perspective, start with self. So how we came together around this concept, very consciously, I must say that 8 years ago, the three of us from very different worlds, from education and academia and startups in Silicon Valley and emotional intelligence labs and Fortune 500 companies, we came together, we found each other, and we asked the question, like, what do we want to build? We were thinking about starting a firm, and we said, what do we want to build that would make this all worthwhile? We know it's not easy to start a small firm. We know that there are going to be days that super suck. And so on those days, like, what's going to make this worthwhile? And we scoured our histories of most proud accomplishments. Like, what were the things that we had witnessed or helped build or seen in organizations that we thought were the most worthy of being examples and exemplars. And the word that kept coming up as we were doing that was inspiration. And we even tried to ignore it for a few hours. And we're like, yeah, inspiration. And it kept coming up. So the next step was we were just curious about, okay, what do we know about how inspiration works? What do we know about how it works in organizations? Who's studied this? And so we went to the research and found that, like, we didn't know a lot, right? So good news, bad news, there are like 4 dudes in social psychology and in psychology who have been interested in how it works. More as an emotion, more as a state. And so we were really curious about how it might work as a trait and something that could be strategically resourced and managed. So we started original research about 5 years ago, and we'll share some of that today. But that's really how we came together. And so InspireCorps, we are an inspiration strategy firm. And that might sound soft, but it's not, right? As you all well know, inspired people drive results. Inspired people take responsibility for growing companies, and they take responsibility for the future. So that's a little bit about how we landed on inspiration.
Awesome.
And it led us to the place of, so what is it? And how do you create it? And what do you know, it can't be this thing that you just sit and hope is visited upon you, because that's not going to work. We got to have some agency in this. And so finding that nobody else had the answer to this, we went about doing our own research and talked to leaders that we saw who were demonstrating it. When you talked to people about inspiration, they know when it's a part of their actions, right? You can probably think of a time when you have felt inspired or when you've been inspired in your work. But it was then in talking with them about what that looked like and how it came together and amassing all these data and looking at our clients as well. We first started, academic nerds that we are, with a definition of inspiration that's like a paragraph long and has Latin words in it and goes kind of nutty that way. And then we got our business hats on a little bit more and said, wait a minute, we got to simplify this. And what we came up with is what Allison is sharing right now. And there's two parts to what she's showing us. There's the definition of inspiration itself, which is those top two circles. First is the idea that possibility. We have a greater sense of possibility when we're inspired. We see more things that can happen. And that can be small possibility, like, oh, I just figured out something new in Zoom, or we're using Google Docs now with our clients, or big possibilities, I'm going to change the world, or how our company's going to enter this new market space, or what we're going to do with our, benefits offerings. More possibilities available in sight. And then the other piece that comes with that is the action orientation, what we call invincibility, enhanced courage and confidence to move those possibilities forward. So it's both the more expansive view of what could be, and then combining that with a higher sense of agency to actually make it happen. Courage and confidence to feel invincible in the face of doing something new, bringing to life a new possibility. What we further found in our research on inspiration, and we saw in practice with our clients and interviewees, was the spark of inspiration is splendid, but can be fleeting, right? You feel it for a moment and it's ephemeral. But what we saw was people actually making it last. And so we've added to that this idea of sustainable inspiration that comes from actually developing, the bottom circle there, an intentional practice around inspiration. Working it like a muscle that you have, that you go to the gym and you do your lifts and you do, inspiration can work exactly the same way. And we've outlined in the book a number of practices or ways to practice inspiration that make it last, give you longer durations of inspiration, and makes it happen more frequently. So you can really have inspiration in your life, in your work, on an ongoing basis. What's fun that also emerged from the research that we did were ways to spark inspiration. Right? We have this possibility, invincibility definition, but what gets you to that place? What lights the fire that's going on? And we talk about 18 different engines, really 3 categories of engines of inspiration that really make it happen, and that you can go back to again and again. that spark inspiration and that you can use in your practice of intentional practice of inspiration as well. So it was really helpful to us to break it down to these really essential elements. And it's a way for people, we hope, we think, we're finding in our practice of it, it's made it more accessible to folks. Okay, I get that. More possibility, more courage and confidence, and then I gotta do it on an ongoing basis to make it happen.
I'll just
so speaking of, oh, sorry.
I'll throw two little kind of tail ideas that help translate all of what Sandy has said. So one of the things that usually makes sense to folks the most is as we're thinking about inspiration and assessing your own inspiration, we suggest to think about your best days, right? On your very best days, we think about those as likely high octane inspiration days. And that there are inspiration engines, or the sparks that Sandy was talking about, that are likely underneath your best days. And so that's just kind of what, one way to quickly think about it. Another way to think about it is that that we all have an inspiration quotient that we're managing, right? So on any given day, we kind of have an inspiration level that we're managing. And this is a powerful lens to know when maybe you need to up your intentional practice if you're starting to feel flat. Now, this is something that people do naturally. We're bringing language to it so that we can operationalize it and do it more strategically as leaders and with our teams.
And to build on that, this idea, what you were just saying, Jen, about the intentional practice, I think this is where our philosophy and our approach really lines up very tightly with conscious capitalism and the pillars, because conscious leadership requires intentional practice, right? Conscious leadership is about being awake and aware. So building self-awareness and being awake to what's happening and really bringing that into your day-to-day. I'd love to just kind of share really quick and walk us through just one example of a way that we encourage leaders to just practice. It's called a reset. It's something that we've been written up about in Huffington Post and Economist. It's a practice that really brings presence and consciousness into your day. At times when maybe you're feeling flat or you're struggling and having difficult days, which I think people right now are having more often than not. It's something that you can do to just tap into that lift, possibility, invincibility. So it's really an intentional practice technique, and would love to just kind of walk us through that right now if you guys are open to it. So what I'd like to ask everybody to do is first just take a look around your environment, because we're all in our kind of own little ecosystems that we're in, and just take a look around and see if there's anything that you can see that gives you some lift. Object of meaning that maybe represents a leadership value that you have. It could be a picture, it could be a word, it could be, pictures of your kids. It could be, I've got this little thing that I put on my desk that has meaning to me. So whatever it is, see if you can find that thing and just have it in front of you. And next, I'd like to ask you to just shift your body. So if you can stand up, stand up. If you don't want to stand up, you can just kind of sit up straighter in your chair. The word inspiration comes from the Latin word inspirare, which literally means to breathe in air. And our bodies are really great vehicles to activate emotion. So stand up in a way that makes you feel really empowered. And I'd like you to just take a nice deep breath in, inhale, exhale. I'm going to ask you to inhale again and really try to give your body that lift as you inhale, like a deep belly breath. Inhale in. Right, you can feel that lift up. Okay, so just notice how you're feeling as the oxygen is kind of pumping into your veins. So you're in this powerful pose, you've got your object of meaning in front of you. And I'd like to ask you to close your eyes or even just look softly into the distance, whatever is most comfortable to you. And bring your presence to your feet. Your feet are standing on ground right now, and the world feels very shaky sometimes, especially now. The ground feels unstable. But I want you to feel right now how certain and sturdy the ground feels beneath your feet. So even push your feet down to feel the weight of it. And as you do that, I want you to think about the values and the strengths that ground you in this moment. And think about one truth, one thing that you know to be true right now for you that's important. Now take a nice deep breath, inhale. And as you inhale, bring your arms up to the sky or up next to you, and just feel that sense of lift as you're coming up. I can't do it with you because you won't hear my music, but lift your arms up to the sky and feel that lift up. And as you feel that lift up, this is really a place of hope, thinking about the future, where we're going, which is hard to do right now when there's so much uncertainty and there's so much instability in the world. So I want you to tap into what hope is for you. And as you're reaching up into the air and you're getting connected with that sense of hope, think about a time when you were at your best. You were having a best day or a best moment. Take yourself back there. What were you doing? Who were you with? How does it feel? And what do you notice about what you're able to create or produce in that best day, best moment? Now, since your arms might be getting tired at this point, take another nice deep breath, inhale. And exhale, you can bring your arms back down to your side. And just anchor in again on your feet beneath you, the one thing you know to be true, and the one thing that you can envision for yourself, that inspiring moment. And just start to stretch your neck and bring your presence back to the moment here. So do whatever you need to do to start to come back. You might wiggle your toes, wiggle your feet, shift around in your chair, and begin to open your eyes and come back here. All right, so any reactions or thoughts to that experience in terms of leadership or the practice of conscious leadership? Would love to hear any thoughts or reactions, folks. Since we have a smaller group, you could either pop off video and just chime in or put into the chat. I'd love to hear what your reactions are.
Allison, I've seen you do that before, where we can actually stand and move around as a group, and it's quite a challenge on Zoom. So I appreciate your sticking to it regardless. But you know, it's just a simple mental exercise that we can all do. It doesn't cost a dime, and you can do it anywhere you want, anywhere you feel, and anywhere you really want to check in and be grateful. For me, it's a moment, but it's about creating a moment of gratitude.
Mm-hmm. I love that. A moment of gratitude. I know for me right now, gratitude's been especially important. It's not something at other times in my life that has been quite as present, but it feels especially important right now. Anybody else? Any thoughts, reactions, specifically in terms of a business leadership context? I mean, any thoughts on that?
I thought that I liked how you had like our feet on the ground, solidly. What are your beliefs? What are your purpose? What's your purpose, your values, that kind of stuff. And then, lifting your hands up and just feeling that hope, that possibility of things happening, that kind of thing was really cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that tension between like what's happening now and needing to be able to pay attention to now, and then also thinking about the future, is something we're hearing a lot of leaders struggling with. And it's one of the reasons why we chose that kind of reset to do. I mean, we have hundreds of different types of resets that we do. Some are more energizing and uplifting, and some are more calming. And, you know, there's all different kinds, and you can imagine doing all different kinds for yourself. You know, we have leaders who, one leader we work with who said he likes to go up the stairs, 8 flights of stairs to his office in the morning and listen to 80s rock music as he's doing it and thinking about his goals that he has to set forward for the day. And that's his reset. You know, it's a very different kind of reset than what we just did. But the idea and the link to conscious leadership is that, you know, as leaders, we're having to perform a lot. We're having to just get out there and do things. And yet how we do things and the presence we bring when we show up, the emotions we bring when we show up, has a lot to do with how, you know, our results, right? And so if we miss that, if we just kind of get right into the doing and we skip the opportunity to just stop and reflect and bring, you know, connect with values, connect with purpose, connect with the emotions that matter, it doesn't produce the same effect. Like, it's such a critical leadership practice. So it's one of the reasons why I wanted to share this with all of you.
Your question, Allison, about management leads me to think about mindfulness, though, too, right? That how do we propagate that practice with others that are being managed, and how do they feel empowered and less stressed and anxious and more present? Because accuracy matters, right? And if you do it right the first time, it's a whole lot simpler for everybody. So, and it's easier to do it accurately if you're mindful.
That's right. Yes, that's right. Yeah, and as you were saying that, I was thinking about how, you know, what we just did was kind of an individual conscious leadership kind of practice, but in terms of leading and managing, you know, we do find that the leaders who model this and also sort of practice it with their teams. So they launch a team meeting with a reset that brings everyone to that place. It really can be a powerful tool for the team to be in the right mindset and to be mindful of how they're interacting with one another and what they're doing. And so in the modeling of it, it gives, I think, employees more permission to feel like that is actually part of their job and not this mindfulness thing or something that they need to do for well-being on the side. And it's like, no, we're human beings, and we bring our humanity to work, and we have to really think about that as integrated into the work that we do and an essential part of doing great work. So thanks for bringing up that question, Dan.
And Allison, I think it also brings up the opportunity for play. You know, just
Yes.
remind you to have a good time, because reset for me, you know, it may not be everybody's cup of tea, but I love Aerosmith.
Woo!
You know, if I'm down or if I'm not creative, I just get old classic Aerosmith and blast it in every room in the house. And it just, I don't know, it just does it.
I love it. Well, and I love too, this, Karen, that you're bringing up music, because it's such an important part of managing our emotions, shifting our emotions. It's a powerful tool. And I think a lot of times we underplay the importance of music and the importance of our emotions in terms of how we show up and how we lead and how we perform, so to speak, in our work settings. It's really critical. I mean, athletes know that, right? It's like, you got to have your pump up song and get ready, you know, get out, get in the zone and all this. And you think like,
Right.
well, what if I have to like really be courageous and bring my best to work today? What is it that I'm doing to pay attention to that and make sure I have some kind of process or ritual to make sure that I'm inspired and present to bring my best that day? We got to create more time for that.
Eleanor, I love your bubbles.
Thanks.
Play reset.
They don't all work. The kind you get from the dollar store, sometimes they're too cheap to really work, but I found a kind that really does work. And, you know, sometimes when I tell myself to breathe, the other part of myself is like, oh, who has time to breathe? But blowing bubbles sort of forces you to breathe. And my, you know, blood pressure comes down and everything else. I like just watching them. So that's my hack.
I love that. I need bubbles. I may be going somewhere to get them later today.
They come in a big pack. I keep them everywhere. My car, my purse,
Yeah,
the
they're really
bathroom.
Love it.
there is a fantastic opening to mainstream more consciousness right now, more intention, more space. Our systems are begging for it. We thought it was important when we were in live meetings back to back. It's even more important now in Zoom meetings back to back. And the education around it is we have to wipe the slate clean. We have to let go of the last conversation. We have to regroup and be ready to bring our best to the next task at hand, to be open, to be present, to be connected. And we have to remember that actually the cultures of our organizations are actually in Zoom right now. That is where culture is living right now. So how do we create that? How do we produce that? Let me say one more thing really fast, is that I had a turning point when I watched Arianna Huffington start her keynote, right? I mean, like, she started her keynote with 60 seconds of breathing for the entire audience. And she said, I want you to get the most out of this. And I know that this is the way that we're going to make that happen. So, you know, like woo-woo is out the window, right? If Arianna Huffington is starting her keynotes with breathing. So yeah, Sandy, please.
No, I was just going to go back to your earlier point. For leaders, you know, leaders' first job is to inspire themselves. And so when we're bringing this into practice as leaders and managers and wanting to be an awake and aware, we have to, it's put your own oxygen mask on before you help others, right? And so inspiring ourselves, finding the right resets to keep our inspiration going and sparking inspiration for ourselves is such an important part of leadership, both to bring it to the team, because great news, inspiration is contagious, love that, but also to model it, you know, as a leader, and to make these things a priority for folks, because as Jen was saying, it is so critical right now. Yeah.
I think if I can just jump in with an observation, Gavin and I talk about this a lot. It's about occupational satisfaction, and the fact that 90,000 hours of work, right, Gavin? This is one of his favorite artists. And so the average person works 90,000 hours in a lifetime, yet 2/3 of those people are so disengaged in what they do. So there's this incredible deficit in terms of occupational satisfaction. And I think that a lot of that comes from the deficit of inspiration as well. I may be jumping bridges here, but and so why do you think why was it such a scarce commodity before COVID? And what do you think it's going to be in terms of post-COVID?
I just have to say, I think I got the $90,000 thing from Allison. So she's the one who said that to me. And I was like, wow, I never heard that before. That's amazing.
You get quoted back to yourself.
It's like, oh my gosh, it's like, boom, like, oh, that's a huge amount of time. And if it's all just boring, you know, for a paycheck, just drudgery, that's a total waste of a life. Just, oh my gosh, you know?
Yes.
So,
yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Mary Oliver's quote, like, bring the humanities right now. Like, we need to remember our humanness and the humanities, music, poetry. Allison pulled this quote out yesterday in a session we were doing with 150 leaders, and like, there were people crying. I'm just saying, like, it was awesome. Like, there was so much human activation happening. Do you have the quote, Allison?
I don't have it in front of me, but I almost have it in memory. But what is it that you want to do with your this one wild and precious life? Precious life, yes, wild and precious life. Yep, it's one of my favorite quotes.
It's maybe the most amazing travesty, right? That a life would be wasted that way.
Yep.
And it speaks to purpose, one of the 4 pillars of conscious capitalism. I know conscious capitalism often thinks about it as higher purpose of the organization, which of course is very important, but there's also this element of with the 90,000 hours and individuals feeling like what they're doing is purposeful and it's aligned to that higher purpose. That's really, really important.
I think that's something that I don't know what I am. I think I'm Gen X, whatever, pre-millennials, and learn from younger workers this demand for fulfillment. Why was there a dearth of inspiration before COVID even happened? I don't know that we've associated work with feeling entitled to be inspired, right? Work is something you do so you can have your life, not the place where you live your life. And I think that, we've learned a lot from younger folks saying, no, I want more.
Right.
I appreciate them driving us there.
Right. Yeah.
The way. Sorry,
Go ahead, Marna.
I was just going to comment to Sandra, as a fellow Gen Xer, don't you feel like this, you need to work hard, you need to just, you need to be able to pay your own car insurance as a kid, you need to be able to buy your own car, you need to, save your money and buy a house. Don't you feel like we were just like poisoned by our parents?
Well, and our parents grew up in the Depression. Right. So, God bless them. That was really where they were. It was survival. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't learn to ask for more.
Right.
Yeah. We've been conditioned. We got to be open to learning from new dogs.
Yeah, it's those 90,000 hours that you're spending at work. Ideally you're spending them with a bunch of people that are going to help you on your journey, right? Because you've got the company's got its purpose, whatever, and hopefully your individual purpose is aligned with that, and you're feeling the harmony in that. But we're all trying to become who we're trying to be, and better expression of ourselves, and the only way you can do that is with the help of a bunch of other people, some tribe that you're with that is also helping you do those things. So the whole thing's got to come together, and that's really the leader's job, of a conscious company is to create that environment where those things can happen, and really point out to people that that's why we're here. Yeah, we got to make money. Yeah, we got to make the payroll. Yeah, we got to get the orders out on time. But that's just the stuff that we have to do. Otherwise, it's like breathing, right? Or whatever. So we have to keep doing that. That's important, but it's not why we're here.
And one of the great tools. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
One of the great tools we had as leaders before all this was bringing people together in a room and creating physical community, right? And sharing an experience. And people are starving for that right now. Any way to feel connected to others. So if we can give them that gift as leaders, or encourage leaders to be doing that, to connect with people in a personal way, it's affecting a lot of us, I think. There's a solitude. Even if you have a house full of a family, there's a solitude in the way we're working now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it speaks to, Glenn just popped in the question, what gets in the way for leaders in terms of being conscious and being inspiring? I think it's a great question. Mm-hmm. Let's go there next. One quick thing about that was just a reaction and thought to what Marna was saying earlier around, yes, we have this responsibility. We have to, make sure we're doing X, Y, and Z, and kind of making sure we fulfill these very important needs. And I think there's been a shift, or there's starting to be a shift in mentality that either you're doing that or you're doing something that's inspiring, that you can't marry those two. Like, why can't you do those things and activate inspiration for yourself and whatever that you're doing? And we often talk about, like, do you want to be inspired every minute of every day? No, we're not talking about that, right? We're not talking about, we all have tough moments and tough challenges, but it's, those situations where you need to bring that energy, you need to bring it forward. Do you have the capability to tap into that? And do you feel that sense of purpose and connection to whatever you're doing? So I think that's kind of an important, like, can we marry those two? Can we create more synthesis between these, as opposed to seeing them as, someone said it earlier, but I do my work and then I go and I have my life, and my life might be inspiring, but they're not really connected. And so that's one of the things we've really put forward in the book, because we're bringing inspiration. The book is focused on inspiration in work and how it actually produces better results, and how you can bring it into the workplace settings more often.
Yeah, I wanted to punctuate that, Allison, that like the business case for inspiration is tremendous. You know, we live in legacy designed organizations from, you know, from the Industrial Revolution, where human systems weren't really set up to be creative, to think, to, you know, to innovate. And so now more than ever, companies need people owning, building their future. They need companies, they need their employees to be doing the great thinking and have the agency to act on it, to come up with, you know, the really important strategies that they're going to need, and inspiration's at the core.
Yep. So maybe we can jump in a little bit on, Glenn had the question here, and I think it's a good one about, so what gets in the way? Like what prevents leaders from being conscious and from being inspiring? You know, if we kind of marry these two things, that when leaders are more self-aware, awake and aware that they're going to want to be more inspiring and inspire others, what gets in the way?
I would say the daily stuff, you know, that comes up gets in the way to some extent. And it is really, for me anyway, there's sort of a two-part dance with that, is that constantly, you know, trying to give, you know, basically create more autonomy for everybody so people can figure out what needs to be done and just do it without having to come to me. You know, that frees me up to think about more of the big picture stuff, the longer range, you know, sorts of things. And just, you know, and I'm at the same time, I'm creating more leaders because they're figuring more things out on their own. They're giving their people more autonomy, and the whole organization starts basically just, you know, producing things and thinking on its own without much direction, which is great. But that's the usual thing, is just too much of the daily stuff, and then the leader maybe not letting that go, and holding on to it because they think that that's their life and that's why they're there. And it's like, no, you're not there to make the decisions. You're there to empower or give the other people the ability to make those decisions and guide them along the way. But you know, get out of the way mostly.
I'm giggling because that goes back to that Gen X and your parents telling you, you have to have one job and be there 30 years.
I'll add to that too. I don't know if it's just younger leaders with less experience, but I think there's fear, right? And ego. And when those two come together, it's like that self-centered fear of like, oh, you know, I have to really have things nailed down so that I don't, you know, so that this whole enterprise that I'm responsible for doesn't look a certain way to this audience or fall flat in this arena. And it really can be, you know, self-limiting and very squashing to the inspiration that you really need to let everything flow.
Yeah, and unhealthy striving is rewarded. And I think that in lots of organizations, the grind is rewarded. You're looking around and the grind is what, you know, gets people promoted, gets money, gets recognition. So that behavior permeates the entire organization, and they're thinking they don't have time for inspiration. They just gotta thug it out and grind.
It's also a case of actively weeding out things that don't add value too, because like Sandy was saying earlier, we're all living more, there's more solitude. There seems to be a wealth of solitude now. And so you have more time to indulge in your own thoughts, and sometimes they take you into weird places that you should be there. Like, no, this is not doing me any good. I need to shut that TV off. I need to get up and walk and move around and just be conscious about all those things you could stop doing to make space for all of the things that are going to provide more inspiration.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think another thing that can get in the way, a couple things. One is, I think leaders may not understand what the value is. So they may just simply see, you know, being more conscious about their leadership or being inspiring as leaders. That's just not, they don't see the value. That's one issue. Another would be that they do see the value, but they're not necessarily, you know, in tune with whether or not they're doing it, right? So there's kind of that building of the muscle of how do I learn to do this and do this regularly and make it a part of my day to day. So I think people fall in kind of both camps to some degree, or one or the other. And what was I going to say about that? Lost my train of thought. Keep going.
I mean, it's also the case that so much of what we're doing now, leaders, individual contributors, everybody, is new, right? The way that we're working from home and meeting, and how long is this going to last? And am I really going to invest in making this real? And the ground is literally shifting underneath us, like Allison was saying. And, you know, it's hard to feel invincible when everything is new and changing. And so I think that the constant change is a real inhibitor if we let it, right? I mean, there's a reason that we talk about intentional practice, and your organization celebrates conscious capitalism. It's really about that, as someone said before, mindfulness of really keeping the priority. I think it's harder to do now and so much more important, right? We really need to, as all of you have been saying.
I wanted to jump in with Dan's question on how does responsibility fit with inspiration? I was even gonna maybe flash our inspired performance model quickly. Are you guys good with that?
Yeah.
Am I geeking out?
Yeah, show it away. No, I love it.
Okay. So this is just to say that you know, the definitions of inspiration that we've spoken about is kind of at the core of this framework, but this is really complicated. How do you do this well for a leader? How do you do this well in a team? How do you do this well at an entire organization level? This really begs, you know, your question begs this. And so we really rest on, you know, 50 to 100 years of really good research. And this is the framework that we use in organizations to create inspiration. So in your question, you were asking, where does responsibility live as part, you know, in relationship with inspiration? So more, you know, inspiration as we traditionally define it, you know, kind of falls in the upper two quadrants of this model, like around new ideas and possibilities, and then being moved to turn them into results and actions. But we know that, you know, as you're leading across people, that there's a lot more to it, right? You have to actually be able to scale. And so that's where the bottom right pillar comes in, the bottom right quadrant. So these are 4 capabilities that we know lead to the most inspiring leaders and teams. And then you've always got, you know, the relationship piece, which is really what's coming up all over the place. You know, can we trust other people in our workflow? And can we let go, or are our egos too involved? So that trust and safety piece. And so one of the really dynamic balances that we're seeing a lot in COVID is between driver and driving to results, really continuing to hold goals and a vision for moving forward, but also building community. And we got to do that in different ways. Being flexible, being empathetic, this, you know, this bottom left quadrant, that tension between driving to results and really satisfying and building the relationships and trust that's required.
I almost think of it as like the Venn diagram in the middle of inspiration and possibility, invincibility, intentional practice that we talked about earlier. It's almost like it's like the heartbeat. It's what matters at the core. It's what drives you. And then these 4 different capability areas are really how you translate that into business, you know, behaviors and results and goals. And so it really marries those two, because could you drive to results without being inspired? Sure, you can. Can you, you know, collaborate with others without being inspired? Sure. But when you do those things with inspiration, really you're connected to that and you're focused on building that muscle, it elevates what you're able to produce. It elevates innovation and agility and you know, a lot of these outcomes that we found in our research. So we find that heartbeat's got to be strong, that drives across these 4 different areas of results.
And on the GE example, it seems like the innovator and the pillar were a bit out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There was somebody sleeping at the wheel in terms of really standing on the core of what they did best and not innovating just for innovating's sake. But really, and you know, that there's good research, the ambidextrous organization, 30 years of research showing that the companies that have sustained have a nice balance between knowing soon enough when to reach into what's next for them and exploiting their core of what they do best.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, get rid of it. Back to
I mean,
glad
what
you
it's pointing to is both sides of the question of inspiration, right? It's how do you generate it and sustain it? But then equally important is what do you do with it, right? Where do you send it? And that's what this model really helps, how to direct it to really high impact outcomes. Is a really important part of the equation of bringing inspiration into organizations and generating business results.
So I see another question just came in from Glenn. Popped this in. Examples you've seen with organizational and or executive coaching clients of conscious leadership done well, especially in recent months. So I know Jen, you had a good example. Have a good example of this.
One of my favorites because it's like the big one. So one of our hedge fund clients, the CEO in the beginning, you know, as things were really moving quite fast and he was trying to mobilize offices around the world, he started a twice daily huddle. And he has continued that twice daily huddle for all 70 of his leaders. So this is now a 4-month standing practice. And the reason he's continued it, because, you know, at different times he kind of asked himself, like, you know, should we go back to like something, a different structure? Do we really need to meet twice a day still? And the answer that keeps coming back is that they're finding new ways to work through those twice huddles, that there are silos breaking down, that there's information being shared, concerns being shared in ways that are providing really different and innovative business insights for him, his senior team, and across their leadership group. So talk about COVID kind of inspiring a whole new pathway of workflow for you know, a high thinking, highly analytical group. Pretty inspiring example.
I've got one more example.
Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, was it a question for Jen based on that story?
No, just keep going. I was just going to amplify something I dropped in the chat. So
okay.
Whatever you want.
No, I was just going to share one more example that I love because it's local and it's someone that we know who she's working in infectious disease at Yale New Haven Hospital. And her name is Margie Golden. We have permission to share this. And so I, reached out to her kind of shortly after all this was happening, and what she responded, it was such a great example of definitely conscious leadership and really bringing her team around a shared mission and community. So she wrote back, we're obviously very busy, but my group has been amazing. They've been implementing new policies and procedures which may change literally several times a day. We're trying very hard to communicate as a group at least twice a day, and at the end of the huddle to acknowledge everyone's contributions. So they really hear that consciousness there, really, and mindfulness of people's, and gratitude of people's contributions. There's a wonderful sense of community, and everyone's poised to help each other out. And then she gave an example of one of her PAs who was in Costco and was buying up all these baby wipes for children, other coworkers who had children, and that they created this shared babysitting service that was internal for folks so that everyone could get to work, which really made a difference. And personally, I want to share, because I just thought this was an amazing example of just leadership. I mean, this is someone who's working in infectious disease right now. I sent her a picture that my son had created, thanking heroes, healthcare heroes, and it was for a school assignment. And he drew this picture, and it was specifically for nursing staff. And so I sent it to her, and I said, thank you so much. Feel free to share with your group if you think it would be inspiring to them. And she took the time, she showed with all of them, and she took the time to come back and write this note of gratitude that was signed and included by all the nurses. And I'm thinking, wow, you all are dealing with, I can't even imagine, what you're dealing with on the front lines, and you're taking the time to thank, the 6-year-old kid who just drew a picture for you, which was nice, but really, I mean, it was such a beautiful act of taking that moment to acknowledge the things that matter, because clearly it matters to them when people appreciate what they do. So just another example of, I think, really nice, conscious and inspiring leadership.
I want to give one too. Eleanor, we'll get to your question. I just want to give a quick one because both of yours were about connection with people, which I think is critical during this time. And I have another quick one that's about having people's backs. I moonlight as a university professor, and all the uncertainty around going back to school for kids is the same going back to school at universities. And our faculty are concerned about their own safety, and we're worried about the student safety and a whole bunch of stuff going on. So the rule is everybody always has to have a face covering on. And the question came up in a faculty meeting with our dean, what if a student doesn't want to wear a face covering? He said, well, you tell them that that's a requirement in this classroom, and if they want to stay for class, they have to. Well, what if they say no? Well, then you dismiss them from class for that day. What if they still say no? He said, you know, if you need to cancel class that day in order for everyone to be safe, I've got your back.
Wow.
That's a pretty strong example. You know, I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I can't tell you what it meant to us being led by someone who said, I get that you're on the front lines and this is a lousy position for you to be in, and I'm going to back you when you make a decision like that. Trust me to be there for you. Really strong leadership in that case, I thought. That's so steeped in what we're going through right now. So it's connecting with them personally, but also trusting folks and letting them know that you trust them. That's really, I think, critical to them being effective in the way, Gavin, you were talking about, that you can give people autonomy and then let them flourish. That trust is such an essential part of that. So then Eleanor had a really interesting question. I took us off rail for one, but how does appreciation and gratitude tie in with inspiration? I love that question.
That's kind of just where the conversation was going. And then you got into, you know, appreciating others and the trust piece. And I've heard Gavin, you know, speak about how that actually releases chemicals and oxytocin and things that create bonding. So it just all seems related. You just went there.
And the link between inspiration and higher quality connections between people is a solid one. Inspired people relate better. And I think that's where appreciation and gratitude come in. They show up in that higher quality connection that people make when they're inspired. It's not just about being more creative, right? You're more effective in your tasks. You are more strategic in your thinking. You connect to people better. You connect to your own purpose better. The benefits of inspiration are broad and compelling.
And those are all outputs of gratitude and appreciation, and also a pathway. So like we have 3 core categories of how people predictably inspire themselves. So the 18 engines fall into 3 overarching categories. And one of the categories is we're inspired in relationship. And so within that, gratitude lives in there, you know, helping others, service lives in there.
Getting a lift from someone, you know, having someone help you out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we're getting to the top of the hour, and I just wanted to make a simple observation. One of the, you know, I'm a simple guy, so I like simple things. In the diagram, one of the books in the diagram was about burnout as a scale, burnout and inspiration. And I think a lot of us are feeling now in this sort of solitude of work and everything, the burnout comes a little more frequent than it used to. So I think this has been a terrific conversation just to talk about this elusive source of energy called inspiration and how to find it, how to maintain it, and some of the benefits of doing it. I really wanted to thank this trio of SEOs here today who have been so generous in sharing their source material, and clearly their energy together is infectious, and just the way that you inspire people is evident. And you know, when you talked about that hedge fund company, it made me realize that there is the whole idea of the work and how the work has changed is another complete topic, because I know it has for our group, and I know it's been a shift, and we've all done very well in that shift. But for some groups that are more used to the traditional enterprise setup, this has not been an easy move. So I think that's something we can talk about more in terms of work culture and how that has shifted. But I do just want to share one real quickie with you, and perhaps this might be a good opportunity for Eleanor to jump in because she's got a little story to tell you here.
Yes. So in the city where I reside, West Haven, Connecticut, which is also where Gavin's company, Watson Inc., was based for many, many years. You know, we've had a lot of protests, and the protest energy has gone in an arts direction, which is close to my heart and my practice over the decades. So the organizers and I have been working on this Sunday will be, you know, there's an art sale and a community chalk drawing piece. And this is all in preparation for a larger, more semi-permanent Black Lives Matter mural, which is going up before the City Council on Monday. So on Sunday for the chalk drawing event, I have 4 ginormous cartons of chalk in the hallway to go over there, and Gavin and the Conscious Capitalism Connecticut chapter is sponsoring that with the underwriting of the chalk and the paint for the more permanent mural, and staying connected to the West Haven you know, community that way is really an exciting thing to see, sort of a win-win. You know, the organizers looking for something to make all of this a little bit easier, and Gavin and Glen, you know, looking for ways to really express their desire to be more on the ground with this movement. So here we are. So you're all certainly invited if you want to come down to the West Haven Green between 1 and 5. And then there'll be a march or a short drive to the Old Grove Park down at the water for the chalk drawing Black Lives Matter gathering.
Thanks, Eleanor, and thanks, Gavin, for supporting this very creative enterprise. And you will be seeing, if you don't make it down there, you will be seeing hopefully some drone footage of what this chalk looks like from low altitude, and good weather hopefully on Sunday.
And just a quick,
yeah.
You know, quick, hopefully amusing PS on that. I brought my bubbles down to the first protest, and they were like, "No, Eleanor, put that away. There's nothing bubbly about this." I was like, "Okay, I get it.
So this time next week, we've been there's an organisation in Yonkers called Grayson Bakery. They've been around since the 80s. They are famous not only for making high quality cookies and things for Whole Foods and Ben & Jerry's ice cream, but they've had this open hiring practice now for many years, and it's really an incredible way of recruiting that requires no background checks and so on. And they've been working on it for years, and they're here next week to talk about it with us on the high side, and how everyone can benefit from a little bit more of open hiring, given that communities of colour are some of the most challenged coming out of COVID. This is what we think is a good time to have this conversation. So we welcome you to that. And on that note, we'll say goodbye, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for showing up today. Always good to see you. Always great conversation. I'm so lucky to be in this community. Thank you.
Awesome, everybody.
Thank you so much, Glenn. Thanks,
guys.
Gavin, everybody for being here, for all your great questions.
Thank you. It was great.
Bye, everybody.